Here we are in the second unit in living with others. I got to tell you, this unit changed my life. I use it all the time, every day. It's such practical, life-changing material. So I'm looking forward to doing this. And why are we doing it? Well, Jesus says this in John 13:34 and 35. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I've loved you. And by this, all people will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. So what we want to do is to look at how can we better love one another in the way we communicate, in the way we relate to people. And this is a practical way that we'll show you. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you a question that you're going to do and break up into small groups. But I want to pray for you, so let's pray. Father, thank you for this course. Thank you for our first week. Here we are, ready to go. Second week, would you speak to us, please, as we look at the incredible, intricate world of human relationships. We want to be able to relate better, to understand what communication is. So Father, come, I pray, and speak to each of us. Free us so we can free others. Show us how we can be better communicators so we can love you more, follow you more, and be the people that you've made us to be. We ask in your name. Amen. Okay, so in a moment, we're going to be splitting up into our Zoom rooms, and I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about who are your favourite communicators. Just who are they? Who are your heroes? Who are the ones that you know are good communicators? And then I ask you this second question. Why is their communication so effective? So think about how the process of communication happens with them. We want to get you getting excited and getting set to be able to understand more about communication. So let's go to our Zoom rooms. So, I hope you have discovered something more about what makes good communication. So there's a number of words that we're going to introduce you to during this unit. The first two are this: content, which are the words we use, and process. And that is what is happening in relationship. So content, the words, process is really everything else that's used around those words. Now the challenge that we have is, how do we read the process? It's really interesting. Social scientists, they say that communication is just 10% at a content level and 90% at a process level. And so people are watching the whole time. They're not seeing the words. Like little kids, you can say whatever you like, but they're reading your behavior. So interesting, living here in Japan, I understand things not because of the language, but because of the process. And so it's really interesting too in Japan. They say, we sometimes say, have you read the room? Can you read the room? They say, read the air. So the whole time we're trying to understand process. So here's a couple of stories that for me illustrate process. So I had a friend, first day teaching, and she got into the school, she put a name on the board, and she was just about to start. A student at the back stood up and said, "Gee, you're ugly, miss." She was just shocked. Oh no, what do I say? But it was really interesting. She just waited for a moment and she read the process. She saw that she wondered why he was talking like he was. And so she said something. She waited, as I said, she didn't say it straight away. She said, "Is that a problem for you?" And he goes, "No, miss," and sat down. She was so relieved. She actually thought he was going to say, "Actually, miss, it is a real problem. You're very ugly," but he didn't say that. And you see, what she did, she understood that this student, he just was drawing attention to himself. He had his own needs. And because she didn't react to the words, "Gee, you're ugly, miss," and say, "Go to see the school principal, get out of my class," but rather she saw where he was coming from. So there's one example. Here's another. I remember Jenny and I, my wife, we went to a festival one day, and we'd normally train people to run festivals. But at this festival, it was fascinating. They had a big long line, and we got our hot dog. And the lady, she had some tomato sauce, and she didn't even look us in the eye, and she said, "Sauce?" like that. And that was it. And both Jenny and I looked at each other and thought, I'm not convinced that was helpful. And you see what happens in communication, it's process that we read. Okay, here is another word that I want to introduce you to. It's signals. Let me explain this by a quick role play. Let me introduce to you Koji. And we're going to do a little role play here. Hi Koji. How are you? Number one. Okay. It's very involved role play. Okay, here's the set. Koji! How you going, man?
Yeah,
good to see you.
Good.
Woo.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so pretty obvious, pretty clear, not great acting, but hey, you can get the feeling. There are so many things that we communicate. I said the same words. Hello, Koji. How are you? But what were the things that you noticed? Hopefully, the body language, the eye contact particularly. What's it like when someone says hello to you when they're just looking totally somewhere else? And the tone of voice. Isn't that amazing? The tone of voice can make such a difference. So, body language, tone of voice, even things like what we're wearing speaks process. And so, it's really helpful in process to understand what is going on. It's fascinating. Communication is to hear what isn't being said. That's the important part. Peter Drucker says this about communication. But really, communication isn't just the words that you say. You can think, "Oh yes, I communicated," but it's what is heard in the receiver. And so our third word is affect. Affect. The emotion that is left as a result of the process. So, after a festival that we run, we really hope people will feel a warmth. People will feel, wow, there was something that I experienced here. So, the affect is what people are left with in communication. You may have heard the phrase, you can win an argument, but lose a friend. And it's too true, isn't it? Sometimes we get seduced by the content. We think the content's the important thing, but we're not caring for people. Oh, brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you in your communication. Be aware of the impact of how your words are coming across and how is it being heard by others. Paul was the master of this. I'd like you to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 23. Here, Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 23. I'm just going to read it in the NIV. Though I'm free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To the weak, I become weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Isn't that great? Paul really understood how this worked. And so what Paul realized, if I'm going to best communicate, I've got to become like them. I've got to understand who they are. And the thing that's really interesting about signals, that often there's cultural signals. Here in Japan, I'm learning cultural things that I need to be aware of. Like some cultures don't look you in the eye, and I can say, look me in the eye, look me in the eye, but I'm being insensitive. And so you need to read all that is going on. The next word I want to introduce you to is rituals. Now, rituals are agreed patterns of relating that help us through complex moments of social engagement. In other words, they get you over awkward moments. What do you say after you say hello? You've been at different places and you've said hello and you don't know what to say. I just find this so interesting. Look at the ritual. This is a really interesting one. But someone says hello. And then the next response is, good, thanks. And you haven't even said, how are you? But they've said it because there's this understanding. A ritual just gets you over those awkward moments. Now let's just talk about these rituals. The first plank that's often there is, hello, how are you? And that's how you begin a communication. But then, what can you say? Well, really helpful ritual is the weather, because it's something that we all experience, and depending on, the rain, the sun, it's hot, it's cold, but it's something that you're able to talk and communicate. And so that's a helpful ritual. Here's another one, and this is what I love about sport. People have their own favourite football team, basketball team, or whatever your country likes for sport, and that just gives a great way of being able to build a bridge. With the Olympics, that's why we work a lot with the Olympics. During the Olympics, it's like the whole of the country is focused, and in fact the world, and so we use sport as a way to build bridges. And so here we go. We're saying, hello, how are you? Good, thanks, how are you? And we've talked about the weather. And there comes a really interesting moment in a relationship. We call this jumping on the bridge. What happens if you're building nicely and all of a sudden someone says to you, you're not religious, are you? And you go, well, what do I say? Because you don't want to deny your faith. You know what I find really helpful in moments like that? I go, well, I really believe in God and He's my friend, but I don't think I'm really religious. Or, even better, sometimes I say, what do you mean by religious? And people tell you and you go, oh no, I'm not that. And so, in other words, there's an interesting moment. But there comes a time, you can't get to intimacy unless you work through some conflict. And so when that bridge jumping is going on, it's a really fascinating moment. And you've got to be careful. Don't too quickly go, hello, how are you? Do you know God personally? What would happen? Because, you see, the bridge is not strong enough. You need to be able to do this. Sometimes Christians, with the best will in the world, break all the rules of social communication because they just don't know socially. You've got to go through a ritual because, as I said, it gets you over those awkward moments. But I tell you, when you work through things together, when intimacy builds, Jesus is known in moments of intimacy. And in fact, this whole process of communication is watching Jesus, Well, a lady in America, they asked her about how she met Jesus. And they said, was it this well-known footballer who evangelized? She said, no, it was this quiet Asian girl. And she built a bridge from her heart to mine, and Jesus walked across it. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? That's the process of communication. It's about building bridges. But the reality is, we wear masks. And I don't know about you at the moment, but I'm often wearing masks. Here I am, in my mask. Now, we wear these masks and we have a pattern of behaviour that we adapt in order to be accepted, or maybe even to avoid pain. But you know what I love? If the process is strong, guess what happens? Your mask comes off and you feel like you can relax. You can take your shoes off. You can just be yourself. And you don't have to say that, just relax, because you won't relax if someone tells you to relax. But people pick it up through the process. They know if it's a friendly place. They know if this is a place where I can just be me. And so what we want to do is to understand if we can create a process where people are accepted. The other night here in Japan, we had a birthday party. It was a great time, and we had a number of people that just turned up, and we did an affirmation exercise. We ended up worshipping and playing some games. It was just a happening place. And all of a sudden we'd finished, and one of the guys who's part of our community here, he brought his 3 skater mates along. And they came along, and everybody was a bit surprised when they turned up, but we were friendly towards them. I had a bit of a chat, so did the others. And then the guys were so relaxed. You know what happened? One of the guys, this was Koji actually, said, I think we should do some worship. And they sang a couple of worship songs, and then someone said, why don't we pray? And they prayed. And these guys were just blown away. They said, that's church? That's how you pray? You sing those songs? This is fantastic. They were wanting to know more. The next day, I saw the guy who brought his 3 friends. He was so excited. He said, I just can't believe it. I brought him along, and look what happened. You see, it was the process. That's what people pick up. They pick up the kingdom. And so here's the challenge. How can we, in everything we do, build a process that's strong and engaging and fun? Well, that's what I want to share, but I want you now to look at the way Jesus did it. Jesus is fantastic at process. It's so interesting. You just watch him. Read Mark's Gospel and just watch Jesus in action. And he just knows how to respond. In John, when Nicodemus comes in the middle of the night, Jesus is really strong with him. You've got to be born again. For others, he's so gentle and kind. We want to look at a story in John. John chapter 4. This is a profound story. And if you want to understand process, I don't think you can see it more clearly than here. And so what I'd like you to do is to look at John chapter 4. And what we want you to do is to, first of all, I want you to, we're going to go into our Zoom rooms. I want someone to be Jesus, someone to be the woman at the well, and someone to be the narrator. And it's a long passage, but I want you to read it all through from chapter 4, verse 4 to verse 30, and then from verse 39 to 42. And from 4 to 26, I want you to look at what is being communicated, or what's the content, but how does Jesus respond to the process? I want you just to observe, just hear what the lady says, the woman at the well, and see Jesus' words, but try to work out what's behind those words. Jesus' first words, can you give me a drink of water? She doesn't almost hear that. All she knows is this Jew is speaking to a Samaritan. Well, you'll follow that. You'll discover that. I want you to look at the words, but what the process is. And then from verse 27 to 30 and 39 to 42, what effect did Jesus' communication have on the woman? What was the result? Because I think this will help you to understand how communication works. When you finish, can you pray for one another? And that will be the end of the group. We go into a break and then we'll come back to our second session. So enjoy the discussion and see each other back in the Zoom room. Thanks.